fellow Movie Crusaders, and welcome to a special review roundup. My name's Sean Waskrug. It's been a while since I've done one of these. I think it was last fall, where sometimes with so many movies coming out, you watch everything and you have an overabundance of movies that you have to review, and instead of just doing individual videos for each one and taking a ton of time editing and uploading and all that, I decided just to put them all on one video. Obviously, there's going to be little bookmarks for each one, so you can jump to each review that you want if you don't care about a certain film that I'm talking about. But we are talking about 5 movies on this particular review roundup. We're talking about the newly released DC film, The Blue Beetle, Disney's Haunted Mansion, A24's latest horror, Talk to Me, The Last Voyage of Demeter, and Meg 2, The Trench. Obviously, a little more on the horror side than most, but these are all movies that I've seen here in the last few weeks that I've just been kind of backlogged with work and personal life that I haven't been able to get on to do a review for, so that's why we're doing them all on one video. First things first, we'll start with the most latest film to come out, which was DC's The Blue Beetle. Now, for me personally, I really had zero expectations going into this. DC right now is in this weird flux with the old regime ending and the new regime starting, and Blue Beetle's kind of stuck in between because it was a film that was a part of the old DC, but they're saying now that it's going to be a part of the new one. This movie does not have any real connective tissue to either or. I think Batman might be name-dropped, the only one name-dropped in this film, but it's not in a way that pertains to, Ben Affleck or any new Batman in general, just Batman in general here. So with Blue Beetle, I didn't really know the Blue Beetle character that much in terms of comics or anything like that, so I had no, it's not like me going into, an X-Men film or a Batman movie and knowing past stuff. So I really kind of went into this pretty much bare bones, but the trailers really didn't do much to sell me on it or really make me excited. The only thing that really did hook me into wanting to see this was 2 things. One is, and I'm going to go ahead and preface this off the top of the head, I'm horrible with names, and I apologize for that. So I'm probably going to butcher most of this cast, and I apologize. So, if anything, I might say the actor or actress that plays instead of trying to butcher their names through the whole thing. But one of the main things that sold me on Blue Beetle was, like I said, I'm going to try this, Xolo Maridueña. He plays the lead, Jaime Reyes, aka Blue Beetle, but I know him as Miguel from Cobra Kai. I really enjoy this actor. I think he brings a lot of heart to all of his roles, especially in Cobra Kai. And seeing him get a top tier, in terms of being a superhero film, lead role, got me relatively excited to see what he was going to offer. Also, Susan Sarandon. I mean, she's been around forever. She's a fantastic actress, and being able to see her in a villain role was definitely something that I was interested and intrigued to see. Now, in terms of the actual plot and everything like that, I felt like I had seen this film many, many times before, and newsflash, if you have seen any superhero films in the last 20 plus years, you have seen this movie before. But it is a little bit different because we are following more of a Latina or Latin family. Now, one of the negatives that I had going into this movie is George Lopez. I have never been a fan of George Lopez. I find him like nails on a chalkboard grading annoying. But he does play Rudy Reyes, which is the uncle of Jaime. Yeah, and then on top of it, they just make him look utterly ridiculous in the film. So I wasn't necessarily excited going into this film, but overall, what I would say about Blue Beetle is I felt like this was a combination of multiple things kind of thrown into a blender, and out came Blue Beetle. But most importantly, this felt very much like Miss Marvel if it was made into a Phase 1 movie that has Iron Man tendencies, but done better than what Miss Marvel actually gave us. This movie does feel very much like a Marvel Phase 1 kind of film. It's very much of an origin story. It's very much playing things safe. It's not trying to do things that are going to really try to, be shocking or anything like that. It really feels like a safe bet film to try and set up and start a new franchise and basically a new universe in terms of DC. Yes, there's all these characters, Superman, Wonder Woman, they're going to be in the same world potentially. It depends on how well Blue Beetle does in the box office. But this movie plays it safe by not trying to attach itself to anything, so that way it can be its own standalone film. And if it, if it fails and they don't come back for it, then it doesn't hurt the new DC. And if it works, then cool, he's already in the world, kind of thing. So the movie does play it very, very safe in terms of trying to have any connective tissue to the other DC, licenses in the films. But it is one of those things where, because we've seen these movies many, many times before, whether it be children's superhero films like Star Kid in the 90s, or even The Incredibles to a point. You've seen this movie, you know the plot, you know the hills and valleys you're going to run into throughout this film through the first, through the 3 acts. What is going to make you want to stay and watch it, or what makes it different compared to the same horror or superhero movies we've seen many, many times before, is how's the cast, how's the action, how's the special effects, and how is the story. I will say for most of this, it works. It does take some getting used to. I will say the Reyes family, for the most part, especially through the first act, is incredibly overwhelming and incredibly annoying through most of this movie. But as the Blue Beetle actually starts coming into the main story front, and we're starting to not necessarily get them as much, but starts to let them breathe a little bit. I don't know if it's just the story started to wear me down, or the story kind of really started to take them a little more seriously, but all the family members of the Reyes family really actually started to step it up a notch in terms of their performances, their stories, their character building, to by the end of the film, you actually do really care about this family. Some of them are a little overwritten, some of them are a little ridiculous, George Lopez's Rudy, but even his performance, I couldn't stand him at first, but by halfway through the film, I was like, all right, I'm okay with it. And same thing goes with Abuela, the grandmother. She's written one way, and then in the second act, she kind of goes full-blown one other way in the film, and you're either on board with that or you're not. I was kind of in the middle for that, but, and the sister, I'm blanking on the sister's name right now. She's incredibly annoying throughout the first act of the film, but she does actually have a really great scene near the end of the second act that I thought was actually really well done. And then through the rest of the film, I thought she was solid all the way through. Zolo Maraduena, like I said, I apologize if I say his name wrong, as Jaime, I think he's great in this movie. He's obviously given a lot of weight on his shoulders because it's his first lead in a film, if you're not counting, Cobra Kai, which even then, that's an ensemble cast. And he has a lot of weight that he has to carry throughout this film because he's got to establish the new superhero, he's got to establish the world, he's got to establish his family. And I think he does a very solid job through this, enough to the point that I'm happy that he got to be a part of this, and I hope that he does get another chance with a Blue Beetle sequel, and also chances to do other films as leads as well. I think he carries emotion very well. He does a good job with his comedy. He's not trying to be over the top, but I feel like throughout the film, he does a solid job of being the main hero throughout this film with his family. He does seem to work better with his assembled cast than he is on his own. I will say one thing that I do think I wish we could have gotten a little bit more of is that the Scarab, the Blue Beetle of it all, that attaches to him, that makes him Blue Beetle, it does come off very much like a almost like a Venom kind of situation, where it's this alien entity that is attached to him that kind of can control him and can kind of take suggestions, but really is going to do whatever he wants to do to Jaime's body. Because of that, I do feel that there wasn't really enough of a connection between Jaime and the Scarab. I'm blanking on the name. I think it was Kajida was the voice for, or was the name of the Scarab in the film. There's not enough of a conversation. There's not enough character building between these two that I would have liked. I think that it's one of those things where she'll talk to him, and then we won't hear from her for 30 minutes. And then she'll, start to all of a sudden understand him a little better. But we're missing these character moments between this Scarab and Jaime to establish a relationship, to establish a connection between the two, of why she chose him, and why he is the perfect fit for her, and also just kind of introducing the world to him. You really don't get a good idea of what Blue Beetle's power set is. It just kind of is what the plot dictates and needs him to be, which I guess will help him in sequels because then they can make him more powerful. But this movie really did lack those moments that we could have had between the Scarab and Jaime kind of trying to understand each other and learn, much like a criminally underrated film Upgrade, which does a way better job of being Venom than the Venom movies did. But it was something that I really needed and wanted a little bit more of. When we do get Blue Beetle in action, I do think it actually looks really cool, really solid throughout. I do like how they shot a lot of the action sequences. It's not bringing anything new to the table, but I do like the aesthetics and the look of Blue Beetle and how some of the fight scenes do accrue throughout the film. Like I said, also, his first transformation, I mean, we've seen it in the trailers a little bit, but we do get a little bit more of it in the film. The very first transformation is rather horrifying, and I think the family being there when it happens actually added to the level of it throughout the film. Now, much like I said, how feels like an MCU Phase 1 kind of film, it also is very much a MCU Phase 1 kind of film in terms of the villains, which are weak. Susan Sarandon plays Victoria Cord. I love Susan Sarandon, and I don't think it's her performance that fails. I think it's the writing and the story given to her that fails Susan Sarandon in this film. She is trying her best in this movie, but the script does not allow Susan Sarandon to breathe or really develop a character. It's more of a tell, don't show kind of thing, and then when she does try to show, she tries to go... It's like she's like having to catch up and do so much more evil that it just doesn't flow through the film. The other big bad in the movie, Raul Max Trujillo, who plays Carapax, I liked his performance. I mean, he is basically the tank in the film. They do try to add some added layers to him by the end of the third act, which I felt was a little late into it, but it was effective for what it did do. But I do think they probably could have just had him be the main villain and not had Susan Sarandon's character in this, and I think we would have had the same outcome throughout most of this film. So the villains in this are relatively weak, and that is not really what Blue Beetle is all about. Blue Beetle is more about the family of the Reyes, kind of adapting to what has happened to Jaime and embracing it, and then trying to figure out how they're going to handle this new power that Jaime has. Like I said, overall, I mean, this movie's not going to break the mold. This movie's not going to make you feel one way better or worse than what we've already gotten with the DCU over the last few years. But in terms of just starting over new, if they decide to do that with Blue Beetle, it's a good jumping off point to eventually what we're going to get with James Gunn's new DC universe. Like I said, I enjoyed most of the characters in this film. A lot of them do take time to get used to because they come off very annoying at first, but by the end of the film, I embraced them, I enjoyed them, and I'm open to seeing more and more what they have to do with this. So for me with Blue Beetle, in terms of like recommendations, if you're a superhero fan, you're probably going to check out Blue Beetle at some point, whether it's out in theaters right now or when it gets released on Max. Obviously, if you're a DCU fan, you're gonna check it out as well. But if you're a fan of Cobra Kai, definitely check this out for Azolo, because he is great in the film. I really enjoyed him overall. Also, Jenny Cord, played by Bruna Marquezine. Yeah, sorry. I liked her too. She doesn't get a whole lot to do except be the love interest / exposition dump of the film, but I liked her performance overall, and I think that I'm excited to see what they do with her more down the road, if they do more with her down the road in the sequel. But for me, do you need to go out and see this in theaters right away? Probably not. You could probably wait for it to hit Max. But if you are excited to see this film, then definitely go out and check it out. It's worth checking out. I did not feel cheated watching this movie. I didn't feel like it was a waste of money. Is it something that I would rewatch multiple times like I do with other DC or MCU films? Probably not until we get some sequels and stuff, and I really start to grow to love these characters a lot more than what I initially did. But for me, it's a solid first attempt for the potential new DC. I'm going to give Blue Beetle a 74%. Moving on to the next film on the list, it is going to be Disney's Haunted Mansion. Now, for me, this one was a little perplexing, because I wanted to go see this right away. I was excited to see this right away. Because this cast is something that I was incredibly excited to check out, but Brian, my co-host, went and saw it, and he told me to basically steer clear. It's not fun, it's not good, it's really bad. He gave it a 1 star, so I kind of steered away from it, but something still wanted me to check out this movie, because I do like everyone in this cast, and much like a potential Fool's Paradise situation, which Brian also hated, that I have not got to check out yet, I honestly, it's one of those things where you just kind of have to see it to believe if it's that bad, or if maybe Brian just didn't like this kind of movie. But he's not the only person that's been hating on this film. I've been seeing a lot of negative reviews about Haunted Mansion. And by the end of the day, I finally broke down and decided to watch it. And I liked it. I had fun with this. I enjoyed it a hell of a lot more than the 2003 Haunted Mansion with Eddie Murphy, which, honestly, if you ask me to describe that film, I know Terrence Stamp's in it. I know Eddie Murphy's in it. Could not remember the rest of that film because it left zero impression for me. But this Haunted Mansion, you got a fantastic cast with Lakeith Stanfield, Rosario Dawson, Owen Wilson, Tiffany Haddish, who I can kind of give or take, Danny DeVito, Jamie Lee Curtis, introducing Chase Dillon, who plays the young kid Travis, Jared Leto, who really was not needed in this film overall. So a very solid cast throughout. And honestly, I'm going to say this right off the bat. Lakeith Stanfield was great in this film. Was awesome. I've always liked Lakeith and everything he's done, but I loved him in this film. His character arc and his story arc, he plays Ben Mathias. He was a scientist who fell in love with a girl who did tour guides for ghosts, and there's something that happens in that storyline. He basically kind of becomes this jaded tour guide who doesn't believe in ghosts but constantly is doing ghost hunting stuff. And he basically gets hired by Gabby, played by Rosario Dawson, to basically go into her mansion and try to find out if the ghosts are really there, which she knows they are, and also find a way to get rid of them so that way they can live in the mansion, and then thus brings in the rest of the cast to kind of help out. And I love the character arc that Lakeith goes throughout this film. It's sad, it's brutal at certain points, and as brutal as you can go for a Disney film. But I think Lakeith acts his ass off in this film. Like, when he shows sadness, I felt that sadness. When he tears up, I felt those tears. I really enjoyed his performance overall. Owen Wilson is basically playing Owen Wilson in this movie. If you love Owen Wilson, you'll enjoy him in this. If you don't, you're going to find him annoying. But it's Owen Wilson's comedic charm that makes you enjoy him throughout the film. Yes, he's just out there to zing little one-liners here and there, but I enjoyed him for what it was. Danny DeVito, I love Danny DeVito. Anyone who's an Always Sunny in Philadelphia fan is going to enjoy Danny DeVito. Is he utilized to his fullest potential here? No, but it looks like he's having a fun time in here, and that's all that matters to me when it comes to Danny DeVito, especially at his age, is he having fun, and it looked like he was. Tiffany Haddish, someone who I normally don't care for, someone who I usually find very annoying, I actually didn't mind her in this film. She does tend to go a little too Tiffany Haddish at certain points, but she also gets a solid character arc throughout the film, even though it is a little dumped on by the very end of the movie. But overall, I liked her performance in this film as well. Now, there are some actors in this film that, while I do like them, they are completely kind of wasted. Rosario Dawson, for example, I felt they could have given her a little more to do. I think she was owed more to do in this film, except for just being the single mother with the kid and potential, romantic, interest to Lakeith Stanfield in this film. I think they could have given her a little bit more to chew on here, especially side by side with Lakeith Stanfield, because Rosario just deserves more than that. Jamie Lee Curtis, Dan Levy, and also Jared Leto. Neither one of them really needed to be in this film. All three of their characters in this movie could have been casted by lesser-known actors to give them more of a little bump, or just been completely rewritten into a different way instead of kind of wasting these actors. Well, Jared Leto I don't really care for, but Jamie Lee Curtis and Dan Levy I love. And I was kind of bummed that they weren't in the movie as much, especially Dan. Dan is literally in like a scene, maybe two, which at that point was like, give him more to do. Like, let him have more. I want him to be in more things. But I will say this, Chase Dillon, who plays Travis, this kid was great. I love the kid. I thought he was solid throughout the film. I think he does a great job showing scared. He's got a good scream for a young kid. He's not annoying like a lot of kid actors can be. His emotional moments with the other characters, I'm trying not to say certain characters' names for spoiler reasons, but I thought Chase Dillon did a solid job. I actually really enjoyed him in this movie, and I actually would be excited to see him do more things. In terms of the ghosts, I thought visually the ghosts looked good throughout the film. I think the utilization of them, and some of them look a little more in depth of detail than others, and some of them are just specters that fly throughout the house. I enjoyed it. I liked the way it looked. The story itself, it runs a little long. I will say it's probably about 20 minutes too long, but I liked the characters. I enjoyed the cast in this film, and I enjoyed the haunted aspects. For a Disney film, it is a little scarier than I expected it to be. It is a family film still, but I expected it for some reason to not be nearly as scary, and I don't get scared, but you know what I mean. Like, when I say scary, I mean I'm looking at things going, that could scare a little kid. And there are visuals in this movie that could scare little kids when watching this film, whereas I felt like the original Haunted Mansion did not do that. But, I mean, overall, I had a blast watching this. Like I said, I enjoyed the ghosts. I enjoyed the cast, even though some of them did get shortchanged throughout. But Lakeith Stanfield was definitely the standout, as well as Chase Dillon throughout this film. And I had fun. And that's all you could ask for with a movie like this. I don't understand the hate this movie's getting. I really don't, because compared to a lot of the movies this year where Brian and I kind of dubbed this year the year of meh, Haunted Mansion surprised me. And it's probably because Brian and a lot of other people really sold this movie short. But I had a lot of fun watching Haunted Mansion. In terms of recommendations, it's been out for a little while now, so it's probably going to be popping up here on Disney Plus here very, very soon. So I wouldn't say go out to theaters to check it. Probably just wait for it to pop on Disney Plus. I think most people are going to enjoy it. I'm going to give Haunted Mansion a 77%. Going to our next film, it is going to be the A24 film Talk to Me. Now, me personally, I had no interest in seeing this film. A24 horror is hit or miss for me. I definitely like it more than Brian does. But this trailer didn't sell me on anything. It didn't make me interested in seeing this movie one bit, mainly because the trailer didn't really show a whole lot. But there has been a strong word of mouth. Every year, there's always one horror film that gets an incredibly strong word of mouth, maybe a little overrated, much like last year's Barbarian, which I thought was fine, but didn't deserve all the love and praise that it got. And Talk to Me was getting that kind of boost. Everyone, it's like a 97 on Rotten Tomato, and even Brian, who hates A24 with every fiber of his being, thought the movie was relatively solid. So because of that, I decided to check out Talk to Me. Now, the general premise of Talk to Me is when a group of friends discover how to conjure spirits using an embalmed hand, they become hooked on the new thrill until one of them goes too far and unleashes a terrifying supernatural force. Chalk this up to a movie that is basically about stupid kids doing internet memes, and that is thus what's going to happen. I mean, if The Ring was released by today, people would be doing that shit online trying to conjure up, Samara. This is no different than like a Ouija movie where it's like, oh, you want to conjure up spirits? Let's do this and videotape each other. It's no different. It is unique in the way that it does it. I do think the actual thing that they do in the film to conjure up spirits is intriguing enough, and honestly, if you were actually there as it was happening, pretty terrifying. Basically, you got this embalmed hand, you lock hands with it, and you say, talk to me, and then a spirit appears, and then you have to say, I let you in, and then it'll basically take over your body, and you want to release your hand from the other hand within 90 seconds, or you could potentially have that spirit stay inside you. That's the general premise of what Talk to Me is about. Obviously, other stuff happens in the film that causes someone to stay attached way too long, and thus the movie becomes what it is. In terms of the cast, your main lead is going to be Sophia Wilde, who plays Mia, who's a girl who has been going through a lot. I think the start of the film, it was the 2-year anniversary of her mother's death. So she's still mourning the loss of her mother. Her and her dad are kind of estranged, and she basically spends most of her time hanging out and living with her best friend, Jade, played by Alexandria Jensen, and her little brother, Riley, played by Joe Bird, and their mother, Miranda Odo, who was really the only name I knew in this movie from Lord of the Rings, their mother, Sue. And it's basically a story of a girl, Mia, who really hasn't been able to get over the mourning of her mother, and when you have the ability to now all of a sudden conjure and talk to spirits, I think you guys can see where we're going with this and what happens throughout the film. The movie's only an hour and a half. It's relatively quick. I will say most of the cast, they're fine. I mean, the acting is not great, but it's also not awful at the same time. There's a couple characters that I'm like, they're overacting or it's almost like they're intentionally acting poorly throughout the film, but it's not enough for me to downgrade it or dislike it to a point. I do think Sophia Wilde actually does a really solid job as the lead, as Mia. I think also Alexandra Jensen as Jade. I think she's solid in the film, and Joe Bird as Riley is solid through the film. What doesn't necessarily, it's not that it doesn't work for me, but what I kind of was wishing or hoping with Talk to Me, because of the praise and how amazing this movie is, word of mouth wise, is it does kind of take a while to really get this movie going, which I will say it does fall into the horror movie template, which for many people who don't know, it takes about 40 minutes for the movie to really start kicking in and doing things, whether that is a Friday the 13th or a Freddy Krueger movie or anything like that. You basically are taking that first 40 minutes to establish the characters on the table and build the lore, and then once you hit that 40 minutes to 50-minute mark, that is when shit starts to hit the fan, and the story really starts to pick up pace, and you have basically another 40 minutes till you get to the end of the movie. That does happen in this to a point, but I also felt like it doesn't utilize its time effectively. It is a very personal story with the Mia character, this could be the A24 side of it, but when you were expecting this movie to really start to kind of get a body count or really start to unleash itself in a way that where you have all these teenagers who have done this trick, who have done this talk to me thing with the hand, you expect that they were all going to get affected and start to kind of knock some pegs down on terms of the horror aspect, but it really doesn't do that. It stays pretty much with the Mia character and very much on her story of mourning, and also with Jade and Riley, that the story kind of, I don't want to say it drags, but you're just, for a horror movie, you're wanting a little bit more, honestly for me, a lot more, to the point that by the time we get to the end of the movie, the scares that are in the film are effective to a point, but there's not enough for me to really think that this movie is as great or as amazing as everyone else is claiming to be. It's definitely no Boogeyman, which I think right now is probably right up there as one of my favorite horror films of the year so far. I think visually it's shot very well. I think, like I said, the performances are average to good throughout the movie. The 3 potential effective scares that we do get through the film, I think, are utilized very well, but there's just not enough throughout this film. And that's kind of it for me, really, when it comes to Talk to Me. It's a solid horror film. I don't think it deserves all the praise that it's getting, like a 97% on Rotten Tomato, or one of the scariest horror films of the year, which, once again, another year, another over-puffed horror film that really just doesn't match the level of what I was expecting or hoping for. But in terms of a horror movie, it's a solid film. I didn't hate the movie overall, and I think if you guys were willing to check it out or wanting to check it out, I wouldn't be against you guys checking it out. But definitely, heed your expectations. It's not going to be like a scare-a-minute kind of thing. It's not going to have this high body count. It's not going to have any of that. It very much tries to almost be kind of a Ring-esque kind of movie to a point, which even The Ring doesn't have a high body count, but it utilizes its scares more effectively than Talk to Me does. So overall for me, it's a solid film. Is it something that I would re-watch over and over again like a lot of other horror films? No. This is a one and done for me. So for me, I'm going to give Talk to Me a 68%. Going to another horror film, this one I was definitely a little more excited for because the trailer for me worked immensely well, and I really enjoyed what it brought to me, and that was The Last Voyage of the Demeter. This movie is basically based on a chapter from the book Bram Stoker's Dracula. It's about a crew sailing from Carpathia to England and find that they are carrying a very dangerous cargo, aka Dracula. The one thing that sold me on this movie, besides the fact that Corey Hawkins, who I love from The Walking Dead, In the Heights, the one season of 24 without Kiefer Sutherland in it, I love this actor, and was excited to see him take the lead role. Also, David I almost said his name right. David Dastmalchian, who was also in this year's Boogeyman, and also Suicide Squad. I love this actor. I just want him in more things, and basically getting, utilized more effectively, and I think he does in this film as well. Also, Liam Cunningham, which everyone knows from Game of Thrones and other things. But what hooked me on this movie, or maybe this movie exciting for me, or something that I was definitely wanting to see a lot more of, is, it's Dracula on a boat, but it very much feels like Alien on a boat. So anyone who loved Alien, which is basically an alien on a ship, spaceship in that case, where they're, everyone's trapped with this creature and you kind of can't escape it. And that's very much what this film is. They basically only have the daylight to keep them safe, but then as soon as nightfall comes, here comes Dracula, and he's not taking any prisoners in this voyage to England. He's basically using this boat to get himself over to England so he can, thrive there and eat more people, because he already kind of destroyed the area feeding-wise last time. Like I said, in terms of the cast, I think the cast is all solid for this. I mean, it's a lot of no-name actors who are basically kind of, fodder for Dracula throughout the film, but they utilize their time effectively. I think David Dastmalchian continues to prove he's super underrated as an actor. He plays Wojciech through the film. He's kind of like the first mate to Liam Cunningham's Captain Elliot. He's kind of the I wouldn't call him a foil, but he's kind of the one person who really doesn't trust Corey Hawkins as Clemens, who's kind of the last second addition to the crew. So they have this divide throughout the film. But I enjoyed David's performance throughout this movie. I think he gets utilized about the right amount for this film, but hopefully it branches him off to getting more and more roles. Not necessarily like this, but maybe even more of a lead role at some point. But I definitely liked his performance of this. Corey Hawkins, once again, proves he can be a solid lead in movies like this. I hope it opens him up to more leads down the road, because I enjoy Corey Hawkins as well. Liam Cunningham, he's great. I love him in this. He doesn't get utilized as much because he does kind of get sidelined for a certain part of the film where you're kind of wondering where he's at through most of the movie. But when he is utilized, he does a great job. In terms of Dracula, he's more of a creature monster Dracula, not like, a human type version of Dracula. I think the visuals of Dracula through this film work more than they don't. There are certain times where the CGI isn't as solid, but when it looks good, it looks great. The very, very first Dracula kill, fantastic. I thought the brutality of it, the gore of it, I thought worked immensely well. I think the Dracula on a boat aesthetic where it's nightfall and you really can't see much at night because you're out in the open sea and all you have are lanterns. I think that spookiness of that, knowing that Dracula is going to grab someone at any moment, I think is effectively used throughout the film. This movie also pulls no punches in terms of what other horror films do, where it's like, oh, I'm not going to say that because it's a spoiler, but it definitely doesn't pull his punches, which I'm really, really happy about in terms of the movie, because you see certain elements in this film, you're like, okay, I know horror movie etiquette 101, this thing's not going to happen, this thing's not going to happen, and this is not going to happen. Well, in this movie, it does happen. So, I definitely credit the Demeter for doing that. I don't necessarily love how it ended, though. It definitely ended almost like it was leading off to a cliffhanger to a sequel that I know we're not going to get. So I wasn't necessarily a fan of how it ended, but the voyage of the Demeter throughout the film, I think, was utilized, and I think the stakes don't feel as high through the first act and a half, but once we hit this one point of the film, I think the casting jumps it up a notch. I think the visualizations of everything jumps it up. I think the seriousness of it and the brutality of Dracula's attacks in the film, and also just the emotional weight of these characters throughout the film, jump up immensely going into that third and final act, and everything just utilized it and worked for me really well. But once again, I will say this is the one thing that I was worried about, is that it is a boat movie, and I tend to find, not counting Pirates of the Caribbean to a point, movies on a boat can be very boring because you're on a boat. There's not really a whole lot to do. And it does kind of have that a little bit there, where there's certain times where you're just waiting for the next, nightfall so you can get to Dracula's next kill. So there's those moments in between that are just kind of like, all right, let's get to the next one because I want to see more brutality. But I think for what this movie does and how they utilize their time, I think The Last Voyage of the Demeter actually does a very solid job being basically what it is. Dracula on a boat with a solid cast, whether they're actual leads or whether they're just fodder for Dracula to kill. I think they are all utilized to their best potential throughout the film, and I think Dracula's kills, as well as Dracula himself, looks great throughout. I gave The Last Voyage of the Demeter an 82%. going to our final film. I said this on the summer show, that I am not excited for this movie, that I didn't want to see this movie, because I wasn't a fan of the first film. We were talking about Meg 2, The Trench. Now, for anyone who has watched my show, who has heard me talk ad nauseum about shark movies, I love Jaws. Jaws is one of my favorite movies of all time, and I have had a real issue with shark movies not taking themselves seriously and being mostly schlocky B sci-fi films like a Sharknado crap and all that kind of stuff. So when I saw The Meg, 2018's The Meg, even though Brian and I see it totally differently, I thought 3/4 of the film was actually really well done. And then the last act went completely to the schlocky, cheesy, corny sci-fi shark movie and just ruined anything that The Meg had to offer over those first, 3/4 of the film. Brian thinks the opposite. He thinks the first 3/4 were boring and the last act was fun. So when I saw the trailer for Meg 2, The Trench, the trailer made it look like it was going to go 100% into that last act of the first film, which made me not want to watch a single second of this film. But it's still a shark movie, and I'm a weakling when it comes to that, so I decided I had to check it out just to see how bad it could really be, because even Brian said it was bad. So if Brian thought it was bad, I kind of had to check to see how bad it really was. Boy, this movie fucking sucks. It is not good. It is stupid. It is so damn stupid that it makes my brain hurt, and it makes the first Meg movie look great by comparison. This movie jumps ahead, I want to say about 5 years, so it kind of stays on the path of how long the last movie was released compared to this one. There's a lot to say, but there's also a lot that I just don't care to say when it comes to this movie. First things first is that you have a movie called The Meg. It's a sequel. It's about a giant shark. Let's see, what do you not do with a movie called The Meg about a killer shark? You don't have the Meg in it very much. That's what The Meg 2 does. It does a very much almost like a Jurassic World Dominion situation, where when you went to see Jurassic World Dominion, you wanted to see dinosaurs, and what did you get? Fucking locusts. What do you get with The Meg 2, The Trench? Barely any sharks. You get these weird-looking dinosaur creatures, and squid, and, oh, most importantly, you know what this movie needs that's supposed to be about a giant shark? Bad guys. a corporate espionage of people trying to steal stuff, and those are the real bad guys and not the sharks trying to eat people. That's what this movie needs. God damn, it's like they didn't know what the hell they wanted to do. Like, and the Meg did this as well. As the Meg kind of took things that worked really well in past movies like Jaws and other films and kind of lumped it in. And the Meg 2 is no different. There's so many times I'm watching this movie where it's like, this feels like another movie, but done way poorly. And there's so many times where there's little things here or there where it's like, oh, that's from that movie. That's from that movie. That's from that movie. It's a very cheap ripoff of that movie, almost like they were trying to do a spoof, but they are actually taking this movie seriously. Another thing you do for a sequel about a killer shark movie, on top of not barely showing any sharks, you make this movie incredibly boring. And The Meg 2 is boring. I didn't find the first one boring. I found it intriguing, and I thought it was very interesting when it was actually taking itself seriously. This movie tries to take itself seriously for the first 3 acts again, but it's also to a point where I just didn't care. Jason Statham has completely, for the most part, abandoned the character that he was in the first film and just went full-on action hero Jason Statham. Like, literally the opening scene of this movie is him just beating up a bunch of bad guys. Why? Just because. And because there are espionage or corporate espionage bad guys in this film, the sharks, for the most part, almost kind of become a second thought to him because he's fighting these bad guys, and there's backstabbing and twists and turns, but you just don't give a shit about throughout this film. There's the newest addition to the cast, Jingwu, who plays Zhuming Zhang. He's the brother of the love interest from the first film that I don't care to remember her name. Why? Because she's not in the fucking movie. His character is basically almost kind of like an NPC in a video game that keeps getting itself in the way to try to get killed, and you constantly keep having to save him throughout most of the film, because this character has a death wish throughout this whole damn film. He just wants to die, and it's up to Statham to basically keep him alive through most of the film. Why? Because you sideline Cliff Curtis through this whole film. Cliff Curtis is probably the best part of this movie, and you sidelined him for like 2/3 of it. You could have just had Cliff Curtis in this role, and the movie probably would have been a little bit better. But no, you added... Not that the actor's bad. Jean Woo's actually a pretty solid actor, but his character is just so blatantly stupid through most of this film. Shuyi Sophia Kai, who played Mei Ying in the first film, who was adorable, she's not as adorable anymore. She's older and not that good of an actress anymore, and she's just kind of there, and she's just kind of more of an annoyance for Jason Statham's character, who is supposed to be this father figure, but he just seems like he's more annoyed about it than anything else than he does actually care about her, which we established in the first film. Multiple times throughout this movie, characters do stupid-ass shit that make no damn sense. If Jason Statham's about to kill a Meg, what do? Shoot at Jason Statham so he can't kill the Meg. Yeah, that happened in the movie. That was really fucking stupid. The rest of the cast is bland, poorly written. They don't really bring much to it other than to be fodder. But you know what? Here's the thing. The characters that are brought in to be fodder, they don't become fodder because they don't get killed in the movie. And the characters that do get killed, you don't remember their faces. So it's like, oh, there went that guy. I didn't see him long enough in the movie to care. Paige Kennedy, who plays DJ, who was a funny character in the first film. They completely rewrite his character in this movie to try to make him more action-heavy, and it's just fucking stupid. It's so damn stupid. There's so much more I could go into to bitch about when it comes to this movie, but the Meg 2 is so damn dumb. It does the one thing that you shouldn't do, and that is not utilize the sharks to their fullest potential. Instead, tries to do everything else you could do wrong in a film the Meg 2 does. Statham is clearly developing a paycheck. He'll probably make 4 more of these movies. Why? Because people want to go see them. I guess I'm part of that problem. But yeah, The Meg 2 is easily one of the worst films of the year. Don't waste your money on this unless you really just want to, waste your money, which if that's the case, then by all means have fun with that. This movie's just trash. It's trash. The only reason why I even give it a high enough of a grade as it does is because when it does try, I can give it a little bit of a, okay, you're at least attempting something, but that's a very, very small part of this movie. A very small part of this movie they're actually trying, and the rest of it is just what BS schlocky crap can we throw at you, and boring bad guy terrorist stuff that really shouldn't belong in this movie, because this movie's supposed to be about a killer shark. I gave Meg 2 The Trench a 29%. Definitely don't recommend seeing this. It is so bad, and it's not so bad it's good. It's just bad. So that's it. That's it for the review roundup. I hope you guys enjoyed all these reviews. If you guys did, go ahead and hit that like, share, and subscribe button to the channel so you guys stay up to date with all the latest videos that pop up on the Movie Crusaders. And of course, don't forget to follow us on all the social media I'll just see below. Coming up next, I'm going to try to watch more movies. There's so many movies that I haven't got to see throughout the summer that are on digital now that I'm going to try to catch more of so I can do more reviews for you. What they are and when they'll be on the channel, I don't know. It kind of just depends on what they fall into with my work schedule and personal life. But Brian Michaels and myself will be back for this week's episode of the Weekly Crusaders, where we talk about 2 movies that came out during this week in movie history. Also, we're nearing the end of the summer season. We got about 10 days left. So we will be doing our fall preview where we'll be talking about the movies that are coming out throughout the rest of the year, as well as going back and looking at our top 10 projections for summer movies that we bombed profusely. It's going to be pretty funny to go back over those and see just how wrong we were. Newsflash, we did not have Barbie in the top 10. It's pretty bad. But anyway, in terms of movies coming out this week, I don't know. I know that sounds bad, but I'm really trying to think of what comes out this week, because we're nearing the end of summer, and the end of summer movies is usually when they just kind of dump everything that they don't care about. Let's see, last week of the year, you got Bottoms. Probably not going to see that. Gran Turismo. Probably not going to see that. Vacation Friends 2 on Hulu. I didn't hate the first one. Maybe I'll check that out. If it's worth having a review, we'll do a review on the channel. There's not really anything coming out until September 1st when Equalizer 3 comes out, which we will probably have a review for here on the channel. But until next time, in case I don't see you, I'm Sean Wasserkrug. Go watch the movies and go have some fun.
you're still here. It's over. Go home.